Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, I sort of wanted to cover off, and this is going to be a bit of a riff one because I was running numbers this morning, and I'm almost ready to put together my Toxic Rain build, Toxic Rain Trickster build guide, as you can see in front of me here. But I'll just crank that audio up actually. But there was one thing that I guess I wanted to cover off more so than anything else in this video, just to raise the people's attention. And this is something that I've seen very commonly with newer players with feedback, and especially people who comment on my channel and whatnot, is around the notion of these build guides that say 20 million DPS on a budget. So this is one, and in particular, this is something that's prevalent with this particular build itself. Now, I want to sort of pull this apart into three logical tests, because there are a lot of videos, build guides, and whatnot that I've found even myself in the past have been incredibly misleading for people trying to get into the game and understand the game, let alone when someone says something that's budget and that it should be under a certain amount of chaos or whatever. More than often I've found that, quite frankly, they're full of shit. And obviously, as you min and max into endgame, that's going to cost you more currency. To say, and I'm not going to discredit people who have put together legitimate builds that can do Sirus A8 with 50 chaos, and there probably are many builds, i.e. Blade Vortex is probably one, and a bunch of other, different jug builds, different things like that where you can self-craft and other things like that. But basically, the first test is, I guess, when I put a build guide together and when I look at other build guides, is common sense. Does it make sense that this build could do this much damage for this much investment? Now, even for experienced players, you can get misled league on league, where it says, oh, this ability is so OP and it can kill everything. And then you spend, 20 hours putting time into a build, or 30 hours putting time into a build, just to find that it can't take on shit. It can't do T10 well, it can't do T12 well, it dies every 5 seconds, it has issues with layered defenses because you focused on offense here. That's the first thing that I guess when looking at a build guide, make sure that they've got videos, make sure that they've got some form of commentary, make sure that they've actually got commentary on their videos or on their posts. More than often I've seen with build guides on build guide websites that tend to say, oh, here's an estimated budget, but it's complete horseshit. When you look at the gear that they've got on their build and you do the market test check, and I know league on league items change in value as well, you find that that build either hasn't been updated if they're saying they're rolling it, and it's actually worth 50x instead of the 50 chaos that they're estimating, or the build itself is just that the tree itself is inflated, or a number of other things that I've run into in the past where I'm like, yeah, that build doesn't look like it could work. How could I have similar gear? How could I have the same gem setups? How could I have the same tree but have 10 times less damage? Now, there might be a mechanic that you don't understand. In the past, I've run into that myself, and I went, oh, I didn't know how this worked in the past, and I've readjusted for that. But more than often, those builds tend to be misleading, and that's where people get frustrated and quit the game. And I guess that's part of the reason why I'm doing this video as well, to help people who have run into that struggle and don't know what they're doing. As everyone knows, on my channel, my build guides, my videos, especially more so of late, have been realistic and have basically said this is the damage. I'm not going to put out a build guide that's going to cost mirrors, because let's be real, most people don't accumulate mirrors, and there's a lot of streamers, there's a lot of high-end players who, number one, have 24 hours a day to play the game as a full-time job, and number two, they have mirror services where people are, or donations coming in from community members which are propping up their builds. So when they do this flex build and put it up and everyone wants to play that build, well, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to. If you work a full-time job, you work 8 to 10 hours a day, you only got 2 to 3 hours a day to play the game. It's just not practical unless you're running a 6-man with hyper-juiced maps. And that's maybe one of the biggest things I want to pick out here. And one of the things I see in forums, in discords, in communication with other PoE players is this flex culture where people just go, I've got a mirror tier build and I can do this and I can do that. No. whatever their numbers are, they generally tend to not give you their POB. And the reason why is because they're simply just saying it because that's the behavior that comes with, flexing on other people to try and say that you're better than them. The real test here, so that's the second test that you need to look out for build guides, content, creators, anything like that. See them actually clear T16 maps and clear T16 maps well. So 14 to 16 is about an equivalent difficulty level. They should be able to do basically everything at T16 level nice and easily, because once you go past T16 and you're talking about doing the T17, 18 maps with delirium mods and things like delirious mods and things like that, then basically if you can't do T16s at a basic level and you're fully decked out with 50x worth of gear, you've got problems. So that's the second test. So the common sense test, the T16 test. So if they can't do T14 and T16 maps, then question that build and then pick apart that tree, reconstruct the tree and see what they're doing. The last test, and the reason why I don't put a build guide up until I can do this, at least at an A5 level, is the Sirus test. So, and this can be mapped by numbers. So if we look at Exile, right? I've just picked out the Sirus estimated HP is 70 million HP. So someone who tells you, and this comes back to the reasonableness test, somebody who tells you that they do 20 million DPS, and this is clicked as shape a DPS, so it takes into account, in this case, chaos resistance, lightning, cold, fire. That's the mitigating factor to damage, which is why you click shaper in the POB community fork. So someone who tells you that they do 20 million DPS, so they do 20 million dot or 20 million on hit, or whatever it is, right? Theoretically, they should be able to down Sirus in 3.5 seconds. Now, then when you watch their videos, you go, hey, wait, they take 30 seconds to a minute to 2 minutes to down Sirus. Now, there are different phases, and this is not optimum, and I'll bring that into consideration here. But best case scenario, if they have a pure whack at Sirus, 3.5 seconds. In fact, before Sirus can go into any other phases, they should be able to drop his phase in under 3.5 seconds. Now, more than often, you don't see that. And the reason why is because that build is not doing 20 million DPS. That's complete crap. My build in this case, which I've taken a screenshot of my POB for my Toxic Rain Trickster, and might I add, the next highest guy on the ladder for Toxic Rain that I can see at level 100, and the reason and where I look for that is poe.ninja, does 7.6 million DPS, and he's level 100. So either he's retooling his gear late game, or 7.6 million DPS is enough to get to level 100 sufficiently in multi-group parties. And I would assume the second option is more relevant because 7.6 million dot is huge. Now my build will do Sirus flat in 18.43 seconds per phase. It goes through 4 phases, it gets 25% health back, I think, in the first 3 phases, and then 75% health in the last phase. That is sufficient damage. With corrupted blood, everything that I've got on my character for damage mitigation, that's sufficient to take down Sirus in a reasonable amount of time. That being said, my build can be pushed up further, and I will be doing that in further minning and maxing, but for the point of argument here, being realistic, 18.43 seconds is the minimum amount of time that it would take a character with 3.8 million dot to down Sirus. Now, this is, I guess, the common sense test. If someone is telling you 20 million DPS, and they can't take Sirus down in, say, 6 seconds, 7 seconds per phase, then are they really doing 20 million DPS? And that's the question I've got to ask you. I'm not going to have a crack at people who legitimately do 20 point whatever million DPS. There are definitely many builds that can do that, but normally when you get into that phase, you're spending a lot of currency. Like one example is Gazzy's Spectre character from last league. So he was up over 100 million DPS, but if you had a look at his cluster jewels, I think he had triple stack clusters, and they were crit clusters, and they were bloody expensive. And all of his gear options were expensive. Everything was not cheap. Now, if that's just to one-hit Sirus or whatever, is it really worth the amount of time that you put into that? Do you get the enjoyment? What are you playing the game for? That's the question you got to ask. there are some builds that people play where well, a lot of builds in fact that don't do Sirus. Sirus isn't even a flexible benchmarkable test for some builds because the clear speed is what people are after. Like self-curse builds, for example, don't excel when there are no mob packs. Those are the things that you have to look at when you're really having a look at your build and what you want to play. The other thing that I guess I would suggest for anyone that is keen to vet builds and really ask questions about whether it's a build is reasonable is actually going to poe.ninja, go away from the build guide that's telling you all this information, how to do all of this. Go to poe.ninja and actually drill in to see what the top players in the game are playing. So, if the top players in the game at level 100 are benchmarking, and these aren't accurate benchmarks, by the way, so this one's probably at about 7 mil DPS, this one could be at, whatever, 5 mil DPS dot. But again, this is what I'm talking about. This is modest gear. Like, they're still running a quill rain on this. Now, they could have just been retooling this character, but they have some pretty good items on this build, I'll be honest with you. They've got Chaos Dot on the gloves, they've got Despair on the ring, increased damage. This gear is not cheap, but, again, they have a level 100 character doing, still dumb damage. Same thing here. Actually go through and vet your builds this way. Look at what real people are doing, and these are guys that are actually playing the game, by the way. So these aren't just a build guide. These are guys that are farming endgame, that are killing Sirus. So this is similar to my build. These are guys that are actually hammering down. That's a really good bow. In fact, that's a perfect bow. But I guess this is what you need to ask yourself when you're following a build guide. And I wanted to do this video because more than anything, I have heard time and time again with toxic rain tricksters that, oh boy, they do 20 million DPS for almost no investment. Guys, this is an amazing build. You should play this build. And then when you start playing it, you have to figure out how to retool it. So my tree looks nothing like any of the 3, 4, 5, 6 different areas that I looked in order to get it to work. It also, I guess the trees that they were running, one of which actually was quite good. And I can't remember who the player was. The tree actually came from poe.ninja. Following other build guides didn't work, so I had to retool it my way and then rejig it in a way that worked for me within a certain amount of budget. So my build is actually like 15x, 20x, which is really modest, but it does an amazing amount of damage, and I'm quite happy with it. Yeah, and there'll be a build guide coming out in the next day or so, if not next week, while I'm away. But anyway, this was a bit of a bitch video, I understand. But I also wanted to just tackle, and I'll put some links to where you can look for different builds in the description as well, or mainly just poe.builds. And I'll put the 3 test items that I always do when I put a build video up. I test, number 1, does it make sense? Number 2, can it clear T16 well? Number 3, can it take down Sirus well? And even just can it take down Sirus, and at best, can it take it down deathless? And if it can do all 3 of those things, it's a worthy build. And it's a build that you could play as an average player. It's a build that you could achieve. I work a full-time job myself. I'm not a full-time streamer. And so obviously, in order to get those builds to work, I have to think around different problems around the fact that I just don't have the time in order to play every build in the game, nor invest 20 hours a day or 15 hours a day in streaming and whatnot. But the other thing is, when I show you when I stream, you can see exactly what I'm doing, the tips and tricks that I have when I'm playing the game, and we talk about it too. Yeah, so that's basically the purpose of this video. It's a bit of an on the chin video, this one, but I guess I've sat back and I've seen enough shitty builds, I've tried enough shitty builds over the years to basically get to a point now where I create my own builds and I retool builds to a way that is achievable by the average player. And that's my target of my channel, not to make mirror tier builds. I don't care for mirror tier builds. I care about making builds that everyone can play, that are inclusive, and explaining those well enough so that I can help newer players get into the game and play at the same level that players of 7 years have been playing the game. But anyway, if you found this video insightful, if my ethos around builds is reasonable, like and sub. if you're annoyed that I'm having a bit of a bitch because it's a Saturday and you know, I get a bit narky when I read shit builds or see all this crap misleading people, you can give me a dislike, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure that people are able to pick up this game and have a lot of fun without the headaches of having to deal with shitty builds or people in the community flexing on them or whatever. And I think making honest build guides where, and you know, and when I say like honest build guides, you know, you can go and whenever you go into POB, double check that someone hasn't just clicked all these buttons and go, oh, what's the effectiveness of shot? See, oh, bam, you know, there goes my DPS right there. You know, oh, I've got hex on something, bam, more DPS. Oh, overlapping pods, we got 30 bajillion of those. Oh, we're already up to 6 million DPS. This is exactly what I'm talking about with POBs. It can be incredibly misleading. Anyway, until next time, like and sub. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm just trying to be real and bring real content to the community, and also real discussions to the community about how to vet things before you do them so you don't waste your time. Anyway, until next time, bye.